The Republican governor of Tennessee has unveiled a plan to give tens of millions of dollars to pro-life centers. Governor Bill Lee says that he is creating a $100 million grant program for pregnancy centers. He also proposed expanding paid parental leave for state employees and broadening Medicaid eligibility for parents and pregnant women. Governor Lee says the state has a moral obligation to support families. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is stepping up the state's war on woke with a plan to defund critical race theory and diversity and inclusion initiatives at the state's public universities. The governor also plans to up the power of the state's university presidents to hire and fire professors who do or do not comply. The Florida state legislature will review the proposal in March. And joining us tonight to discuss is Evita Duffy with the Federalist. Evita, great to have you with us. Let's get right to it. Why do you think these diversity initiatives and teachings like critical race theory are such a danger to our schools and our children?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I got the foundational critical race theory texts when I was a freshman in college. They're from the 70s or 80s, and they were taught like regular philosophers. Like you would read Aristotle, you would read Plato, you would read Karl Marx. That's how they're taught, the right way. The problem is that the way that they teach CRT, especially as you get into the younger levels, you're in middle school, high school, elementary school, it's taught as fact. And this is a school of thought. It's a way of viewing the world. It's a very racist, a very bad way of viewing the world, in my opinion. But the problem is they're not giving students the opportunity to weigh whether this is an accurate way of seeing things, and instead just presenting it as fact. And it's become extremely detrimental. And on the college level, they've made it so that it's embedded into the system. So you have these critical race theory inspired committees for every single one of the departments, so that then they're able to teach this ideology to students who otherwise wouldn't get it. So in like the science department, the math department, and they're also using it to impact hiring processes. So in the name of CRT, in the name of equity, diversity, and inclusion, they're having a social justice litmus test for who should be hired instead of who's the best person for the job. And DeSantis is saying that's not going to happen in Florida anymore. I'm not going to allow our taxpayers to fund this. And I think it's a really good move on his part.
Yeah, and do you expect his plan to get traction in Florida? And also, do you think other states may follow suit?
Yeah, I think if it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to happen in Florida. He's done an amazing job of leading that state, and I think the legislature is on his side. I think they're going to pass his proposed bill. But I think other states it's a little more difficult. For instance, in Wisconsin, it's where I'm from. We have a Democrat governor. There are some, I think, where you'll see the most traction instead of sort of these big sweeping pieces of legislation is actually really on the roots. So you have parents rising up and saying, hey, we're going to actually fight this on the school board level. We're going to, show up to these school board meetings and talk about it. I'm going to be more involved in what my kids are learning and ask to see their homework, and maybe even lobby to get cameras in the classroom so we know exactly what's being taught. And I think that's really where you're going to see this change is on a real individualized level. And I think that is even more encouraging than this legislation, because really this is about parents taking back control of the classroom.
Evita, we're almost out of time, but I really want to get this in. As you know, tonight President Biden is going to deliver his State of the Union address. He's expected to touch on the war in Ukraine, the economy, and crime. And I know you've been following a city very closely that's really kind of been the epicenter of crime, and that's Chicago. What can you tell us about what is going on in the streets there?
Yeah, well, I mean, Chicago is a disaster. I went to school there. I went to the University of Chicago. I was there for 4 years, and crime has increasingly gotten worse under the leadership of Lori Lightfoot. She was elected in 2019. People are pistol whipped, shot. I've had several of my classmates have been shot, several killed, and it's a very terrifying situation. And there's a mass exodus in Chicago, and it's the same for a lot of many liberal cities in this country, and in LA and in New York. People just don't want to live there anymore. And I think really until they start seeing the real economic hit of this exodus, will they start to change their ways? But as of right now, it's a disaster. And unfortunately, the people that can get out, and the people that can't because they can't afford to end up staying. And so the people that get hurt the most are actually poor, oftentimes minorities, which is very ironic because those are the people that Lori Lightfoot and J.B. Pritzker say they want to help. So it's a very sad situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're out of time. With so much more we could talk about. We'll have to get you back on. Evita, thanks so much. Great to hear your insights.
Thank you.